So, either the power company or the federal government or Skynet absolutely doesn't want me talking about night vision stuff because my power blinked and that's why the stream ended. So, I will just start chattering along while I'm waiting on Andrew to rejoin me and try to figure out where in the world I was in my train of thought before our power blinked. And it only blinked for about a half a second, which is the really agitating part. Like, Stewart is going to be upset because he's going to tell me this is why I should have a UPS on this entire desktop setup specifically for moments like this, and I'm almost prepared to agree with him. But anyway, so what I was saying about this mod armory J arm before, while I kill time, wait on Andrew to join, and we'll pick up with the rest of the topics.
Stop.
Hello, Andrew.
Hi.
I was just telling the audience that, by the way, is your P4 still running?
It is now.
Okay. This is going to be a bucket of fun to edit later. But yes, dumbass Texas redneck, I agree with you. You were about to, and I beat you to it. I need to just build or buy a UPS for this entire desktop setup, not just for the router. But in any case, so this Mod Armory J-Arm, I would call it a resounding success. I would say it comes with a couple of caveats in the fact that it is not a one-to-one reproduction of, like, the original J-Arm. It's not so much a J-Arm anymore. It's more of just an arm. And I would say that if that makes it fit your face, like it fits my face better than the factory one did, then groovy, awesome upgrade. Especially if you're going to stay within the bayonet ecosystem. I will say that, and I didn't have this experience with the plastic ones, but on this one, this actually had a fair amount of play right at the junction point of the bayonet. In other words, like the arm itself doesn't flex anymore, but it wiggled a lot once it was installed in there. And I tried tightening up the little screw on the G11 to tighten it up, and it helped, but it didn't eliminate it. But a couple layers of duct tape solve the problem exactly. And if that gives you heartburn that you would put duct tape on a $150 arm that is attached, to a couple $100 mount that is attached to a couple $100 helmet that is attaching a several $1,000 piece of night vision equipment to your melon, I don't know what to tell you. Welcome to the world. Because, I've got every gun I have has zip ties on it. It's just, this isn't about fashion or tactical nonsense. This is about making stuff fit and work. Know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you gotta do what you gotta do to make it work for your melon, then that's what you gotta do. I don't know. At some point, you wonder where the frustration if you can't find something that works. In the but and then you end up spending the money to make it work. Basically, I mean, I don't know. I hate modding stuff. It's like if I buy it, I want it to work. If it doesn't work, then I will get rid of it and I will spend the money that it takes to make it work. So, and if that includes buying a new Wilcox mount like the G24 Dovetail, and then buying like the Noise Fighter J arm that Noise Fighters just came or they have, then I will go that route because I'd rather pay and not have to deal with all that junk and all that crap than anything. Because if you look into the Wilcox or if you look into Noise Fighters, they have a J arm. It's the AX14 Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I've heard great things about it as far as articulation, and then as far as lining up to the eye, everything that basically it sounds like with what your issues you're having, it sounds like it might be a good route. But then you have to buy, like the G24, the mount,
Which
which
is
runs about
under
$500.
$500, yeah.
But I mean, the G11, you're looking at $300-400. So if you sell that, then you basically upgrade kind of thing. It all depends on what you want to do.
Yeah. I
The
think
other thing that I've heard that a lot of people do like about the Noise Fighter one too is the ability. So like so my night vision, basically I can take it and I can take the goggles, take them and move them up, so that I can still keep it down, but move one piece or one eyepiece out of the way if I want to, kind of like so then I can be running just mono if I want. And that's kind of like what the Noise Fighters, the route that they took is so you can actually have the mount down And then you can articulate that out of the way of your eye. So I don't know. It all depends on what you want, how much you want to spend, and stuff like that. But if you can recoup some of your money by selling like the G11, but
Yeah, I think kind of to my point though is like I all the warnings I'm giving, they don't apply to me. It works perfectly for me. It's just things I'm noticing where I'm kind of like hedging my bets of if you fall into that narrow group of people where if your eyes are further away from the center line of your head than mine, this thing's going to give you trouble. Like immediate trouble. But that being said, my eyes happen to be the right dimension. It works perfectly for me. This positions the PBS 14 like a solid inch further away from my head than the J arm ever would, which I appreciate because previously I had the G11 mount as far out away as it would go, and that I still didn't have room between the PBS 14 and my eyeball for iPro, which is not an enormous problem until you want to start running drills and doing stuff like real stuff with it. So it's like it's all these little problems I had with the G11 and the original J arm. This thing fixed, but I can also see the potential for somebody to wander into this thinking that what I'm giving is a glowing recommendation of the Mod Armory J arm, only to realize on the back end, oh, my face isn't like Phil's, and this is a problem for me. Like, I mean, but call it what it is. Like, this is why we were talking about, like, anytime you start dealing with anything that's head worn, whether it's helmets or it's eye protection or it's night vision, anything that interfaces with your face is going to be so individual, and the amount of adjustment that has to be present in anything to make that work is so incredible. There's almost more ways to screw that up than there is to get it right.
I mean,
So
that's just not head. It's this entire industry, the entire gun industry. I mean, and even if you look at even trucks, I mean, vehicle like modding and stuff like that. But a lot of it is if you're into the gun industry at all, and you are, hey, I'm buying this new pistol. Okay, now I need a holster. Well, I this holster I like more than this one. I have four, six or so holsters that they're just in a drawer
mm-hmm.
because I have either a moved on, bought a new one, something that's a little bit better that fits me better, or they're multi-use or something like that. Something that okay, well, I don't necessarily run a light all the time on the bottom of my pistol, so this one is light bearing. Okay, now this one is light bearing. Okay, this one's inside the waistband. This one's outside the waistband. This is, Safari Land. This one, and all this crap. Like with this industry, you're always going to have pros and cons, and you're going to have a junk drawer of stuff that you're hanging on to for whatever reason. So when a friend is like, "Hey, I need this, or this," you're like, "Hey, I got this. Here you go. You can have it." Um, oops, didn't mean to hit that. But so it all depends. I mean, that's like I said, with this industry, you're going to be buying things, either reselling or sending back,
Mm-hmm.
and testing stuff out. That's all this is. And you can watch thousands upon thousands of review videos on this one item that you want to get, and you can get it and be like, it could have glowing reviews and 5 stars all the way across, but you can get it and you're like, you know what? It doesn't really fit me. I don't really care for it. So it's this industry is very individualistic to where, yeah, you're gonna be testing stuff out. So, but that's the part of the fun about it, is finding that one thing because there's so many companies out there that, yeah, they are making a lot of different products, or they're making a product a different way or whatever. And you'll stumble across something. And I mean, the industry, the community is large. So if you are looking around for something and you stumble across a forum or a board, or if you're part of one and you're like, hey, I'm looking for this, and this is the reasons why, someone probably is out there that could point you and be like, hey, this company out of this little podunk country or podunk back, woods business that is that the guy's making stuff out of his garage. Check them out. And you could buy this thing and it would work fine. Like that's what's crazy. Or if you have the ability to make your own stuff, make your own stuff. So, but yeah, no, that's. I mean, it's. I'm glad you found something that works good for you. That was my biggest complaint about the original mil spec J arm. Is my big thing was, it didn't necessarily line up correctly with my eye. I made it work, but it was very wobbly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one thing I didn't like about it. I explored like putting rubber bands, because like that wobble where the bayonet connects with the mount, a lot of play. And that's one big downside. I mean, I'm not military. I haven't messed with J arms too much, but that's the one big downside that I found with the J arm is a lot of play. So a way to fix that I found online is people were taking rubber bands and they were wrapping rubber bands around it to stabilize it. And they still do that even with the bayonet or not the bayonet, but the dovetail.
Mm-hmm.
They still do that because it does dovetail, even though it's a more secure connection, more stable, a more, more surface area and stuff like that. It does have a little bit of a wobble. So if you're going to sit there and you can put something on there that'll stabilize it, one, it stabilizes it, and two, it makes it a little bit more secure so that bayonet, like if you do bump it or something bumps it, your nods aren't just going to like fly off your head. So, but yeah, it's all going to be play and what can I do to make this better or what can I find, stuff like that. So
Yeah. So I guess, from my perspective, that was if anybody's in that same boat I am, and they're like, I don't want to say dead set against getting into the dovetail ecosystem, but they're kind of like, I'm already this deep in, and I don't really want to spend $500 on a friggin', Wilcox G24 similar, or they're just in the boat of like, I don't foresee myself ever going to duels or anytime soon, so I'd like to make an incremental upgrade in what I have. Like, this is a good place to start.
mhm.
And what you mentioned earlier about making stuff yourself, I mean, where do you think this came from? This is a friggin' homemade lanyard I made out of some nylon webbing I had and some 550 cord and some thread and some Velcro. Works beautifully, by the way. You just, smack that on the very top of your helmet after everything's in the down position, raise your nods up, and it's perfect. It works. It does what it's supposed to. Make sure that if your night vision pops off the mount or if the J arm pops off the mount or breaks away or anything happens, that this doesn't take a swan dive.
Mhm.
So that took longer to get through than I was planning on. Thank you, Power Company. I was doing some looking into recently,
Mhm.
and like we've talked about the Bruen decision in the past. It's old hat. The Supreme Court finally told all the lower courts, "Hey, quit your judicial nonsense and like apply the Second Amendment as it was written. Text in tradition and history is the metric by which you judge something, and you're no longer allowed to engage in what's referred to as interest balancing, where it says, well, we know what the Second Amendment says, but guns are scary and bad, and we have to protect the public from them." That's the crux of what the Supreme Court said in the Bruen decision. That was June 23rd, 2022. A year later, July 14th, federal judge upholds Oregon law banning large capacity ammunition magazines, requiring permit to buy guns. Give me a second. I have to wait for some of these tabs to reload because, the power company hates me.
Just the man trying to keep you down.
April 26th of this year, judge says DC's ban on high capacity gun magazines is constitutional. That aggravates me incredibly. And March 28th, federal judge upholds Delaware AR-15 magazine bans despite finding they're in common use. Now, this judge, to his credit, agreed that, because I looked up the statistic, it's estimated that there are 150 million AR magazines in existence. 20 million AR-15s. So this judge, to his credit, actually admitted, yes, they're in common use, but despite that, he said that large capacity magazines represent such a large technological change from the time of the founders, and they're scary and they're dangerous, so he upheld the ban. Now, I did say this when the Bruen decision came out, that this was a win, this was a small win, this was a step in the right direction, but I said back then, this is not over. This fight isn't over. These judges are not going to take this laying down. These precincts and jurisdictions are not going to take this laying down. They're going to fight this to the death, and they're going to continue to fight to the death until the Supreme Court finally, grabs them by the collar and slaps them around a little bit and says there are no gun laws that are not infringements, period, end discussion, and just starts wiping them out. No more remanding them back to lower courts. No more chastising the justices and telling them to do their jobs properly, but literally fast track every Second Amendment case, approve every last one of them, strike every single law down, and firmly put their boot on the neck of these lower courts and say, you do not get to rule on these anymore because you've proven to be incapable of ruling on them. Now, that sounds like a really antagonistic stance to take, but I'm about this close to recommending tarring and feathering justices over this. Like, I'm really frustrated that when we, the populace, spend years and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers, while the state spends our own tax dollars against us, and we finally win, we still lose.
Yeah, it won't happen. I mean, just like what Joe said.
Thanks,
It,
guys.
yeah, it won't happen. I mean, you look at, it's frustrating because, like I was telling you yesterday, or I was telling you before the show and stuff. I mean, like I had dinner with Trek last night, and we had a good talk about just like the crap that's going on in this country. And one of the biggest things that we talked about was uh, the fact that the lower courts, these states, you have the Bruen decision that basically upheld the Second Amendment and made, yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it was a good step in the right direction. You have the Supreme Court constantly um, there, and that's the thing, is because of the Bruen decision, you're seeing them pass on a lot of a gun law, or gun what's the word I'm looking for, basically lawsuits and stuff like that, because of the fact that they did Bruen, and all they do is they just point to Bruen and say, listen, no, we're kicking it back to lower court, look at Bruen and make the decision yourself, and the correct decision. But that's the thing, though, is nothing is going to happen. Nothing when you got Michigan, you have Delaware, you have DC, you have California, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. You have all of these states that are like, hold my beer, we're going full ham, and we're going to start passing anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment, anti-First Amendment, whatever you want to call it, whatever amendment. Like, our Constitution has been shredded to the point, like, and we've talked about this before, to the point of no return.
It's toilet
And
paper.
yeah, and that's what they're using. They're using it to wipe their butt with or stomp their feet on. Like, they don't give a crap. And so the only way this is going to stop is, like, yeah, the Supreme Court needs to start holding these states and these lower courts more accountable. But how do they do that? The Supreme Court doesn't, what's the enforcement arm of the Supreme Court? Like, bad court. What are they going to do? Nothing stops these people from doing this. What's going to take is, it's going to take the people to say, hey, listen, we're going to drag you out into the middle of the street and we're going to tar and feather you. Like, I mean, I'm not advocating for this, but look at Mexico. They execute quite a few people for, judges and all kinds of crap that rule. I'm not advocating for that by all means, but like, these people sit in their ivory tower and then they're untouchable. Like, that's ridiculous. The fact that Congress, the fact that congressional, like, somebody on the way, that basically, if as long as they get out of their car and they are like, hey, I'm on my way to do a vote, like, they can't be pulled over. Like, they can't be taken into custody if they were like, hey, I'm on my way to do a vote. Like, I can't, like, nothing can happen. So they can literally, but that's the power that they have. Like, and the fact that they're sitting there and they pass these laws, but then they are exempt. When laws get passed in different states, the people who pass them, they're exempt. Judges are exempt. Police are exempt. Military are exempt. Correctional officers are exempt. Retired judges, retired correctional, retired LEO, they're all exempt. Why? And that's the thing, is why. And that's the thing. And I would love, what I would love to see, and I've said it before on the show, is I would love to see, if I was governor, if I was president, if one of the first things, or even if I was in Congress, one of the first things that I would try to do is introduce a bill or ask for a bill and say, listen, what this bill, it's simple. This bill says, if you introduce any kind of anti-legislation of any kind, you are not exempt. You fall under, if you put in anti-gun legislation, LEOs are not exempt. Military, not exempt. Congress members, not exempt. Like,
Protective
nobody is
details.
exempt. Yeah, protective details, not exempt. And So yeah, but is that going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. This country is on the cliff. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next, 10 years, with everything that's going on. But I truly believe this country is, it's teetering on the edge of a cliff that's crumbling underneath the foot, and they're losing their balance, and it's going to go over. And us as anybody who's a gun owner, anybody who is a constitutionalist who believes in the Constitution, um, we're going to be sitting there. We're going to be we're going to have a fight ahead of us, and it's going to come to a crossroads. I truly believe that, um, because of what's going on. The fact that when we're talking about magazines, like magazine bans and stuff like that, and just like your title here, are magazines protected by the Second Amendment? If they're not protected by the Second Amendment, then what's going to stop anybody from going after anything like first freedom of speech? Well, if then they say, well, these 30 round magazines and stuff like that weren't invented when the founding fathers and stuff like that. Well, I beg to differ, because if you look at a puckle gun, you look at all these other guns that are repeating firearms that they had back then with large magazines. These were around. Large capacity magazines have been around forever, or for a long
Well,
time, rather say forever. But just really quick though, I want to finish up with saying, like, that goes to the First Amendment. If they make that argument for the First Amendment, then we can also, then what's going to stop them from making the argument for First Amendment for forums, for the internet? I mean, the internet and forums were not around. I mean, it was it was quill and paper, and you had town hall meetings and stuff like that. You had meetings that people could voice their opinion and everything, but nothing online. So listen, if you're like, this can go a lot of different ways. So it's just gonna be interesting.
well, and to back up your point about large capacity magazines, like let's allot that. When would you say modern gun control really got its feet underneath it? I would argue the NFA. Like that's,
Mm,
to me, that's the most noteworthy large scale federalized gun control effort. I'm sure there's something prior to that. I'm sure there's somebody that knows some rare obscure historical footnote, but that is really the first one that comes to most people's minds, is the
what year
National
was the
Firearms Act.
NFA? Was it? Shoot.
20 20 1920 something, I want to say. You put me on the spot. I can't think of it. Somebody
1934.
34. That's
Yeah,
right. And
34. Okay,
36
yeah,
was when it was challenged and upheld in the Supreme Court.
yeah. I would say definitely the NFA. I would also say the Gun Control Act of '68. Um,
So, I guess where I'm going with this is, let's start at 1934. Let's work backwards to what major technological breakthroughs are made in firearms. Because like by 1934 we had the frickin' Maxim gun, so you had full blown belt fed machine guns that were pretty commonly strewn all across Europe because of World War One. I mean, we've got Gatling guns. We've got quite a number of things that are technologically advanced beyond that of single shot rifles and smoothbore muskets. So, like, I cringe at the argument that, well, it's a technological leap forward, because it harkens back to this nonsense about how the founding fathers never would have given people this right if they'd have known that guns were going to advance forward, technologically, ever, for any reason. It's a stupid, asinine argument. And the idea that firearms are protected by the Second Amendment, but the magazines aren't, is like saying let's say you have the constitutional right to drive a car on the street, but you don't have a right to gasoline. There comes a point where their argument, the reason I get so upset, so wound up, is because their arguments are stupid on the face of them. They don't make any sense. They have no basis in the rational world. They have no basis in common sense. It's a stupid argument, and I hate having to debate a stupid argument with a stupid person who cannot see, who will not stop and think critically about what they're saying to realize it's a dumb argument. If magazines are not protected, but the firearms are, then you're telling me that ammunition is also not protected, which I'm sure they would salivate over. You're telling me that free speech is protected, but you can't have free speech on the internet because that's a technological leap forward. Like, it's a dumb argument. And the minute you start applying it outside of the space of firearms, it looks like a stupid argument. But that is their argument. And that's why I get irritated about it. That's why I get so bound up over these judges, is that I get frustrated because we exist in a political legal system where our supposed betters can finger wag to us and tell us, despite the Constitution, which is the people's document to the government to restrain their power, and we tell them over and over and over in historical writings, if you cross these lines, there will be consequences. But then they look at that and they say, but we know better. We're your betters. So we're going to restrict your rights preemptively, even though you've committed no crime, even though there's no victim, even though you've done no harm. We're going to restrict your rights for your own benefit, which, by the way, we're going to do while we exempt ourselves from the same frickin' laws. And then, because they just can't help themselves, when they cut you wide open and just spit into the wound, they got to pour some salt into it to make it hurt a little bit worse. But on top of all this nonsense, when we take the government to court to prove to them their laws are wrong and they are not in the spirit of the agreement we gave to the government to consent to be governed, they then use our own tax dollars to fight us in court. So, if that sounds like a libertarian rant, I'm entitled to those every now and then, because this whole situation just pisses me off to no end. I cannot stand the idea that we have to spend the money that we're trying to use to feed our families and feed ourselves in court to fight against the people who are taking that money from us in taxes to fight against us. It's insulting.
And then they want more when they want more money, so they tax us higher. So
Thank you,
no,
Andrew.
it's have that aneurysm. But the idea that the idea that if you don't get frustrated over, I don't know, if whatever you get frustrated over, I don't care what it is, like where your stance is, and all that crap. Like, one thing you should be frustrated over is the fact that the government fights its own people with their own money. Like, that should annoy literally every single tax-paying American more than what we're sending over to the Ukraine. But that, I digress.
Did you hear recently that the government got their teeth kicked in about how and was told by a federal court that they are not supposed to be contacting social media to censor free speech, and the Biden administration actually had the frickin' unmitigated gall to appeal the ruling? I'm sorry to say, but if that doesn't clearly lay out my entire aggravation and gripe in one sentence, I don't know what to tell y'all anymore.
Well,
They are literally saying, we don't want to hear your criticisms. We just want you to shut up and give us your money. It's like living on a block in New York and the mafia is coming down the street saying, you got to pay your protection money so nothing bad happens to y'all. I mean, we literally we're ruled by a mob.
Yeah, that's all government is organized. It's organized crime. That's literally all it is. I mean, if you don't pay your taxes, if you don't pay your protection, they kick your door in. They'll take you. If they, if you don't, if you try to fight back in any kind of way. I mean, look at this gun store? One of the gun stores that was suing the ATF with the Gun Owners of America over the frames and receiver rule, which has been vacated, by the way, permanently vacated, so that rule no longer exists. So anyway, but that's a whole different show. This gun owner or this gun store, the ATF came in and pulled his FFL. And so now he is again suing the ATF for basically retaliatory. And the ATF agent that came in basically was said, the guy even apparently he told the article, I can't remember exactly where I found it at, but basically the article quoted the ATF agent saying, yeah, this looks like retaliatory action because of basically what you did. But that's the thing though, is we have these agents, like you have this agent that is sit there and he's like, yeah, this is plain and simple. This is what it is. But then they still do it.
Of
We need
course.
some of these bootlickers to like just stand up for, if they don't believe in it, stand up and be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like if the government would actually lose some of their and that's the biggest thing is they have these strong arm, they have all these agencies, they have all these agents, they have all these people that are, yeah, they need a job to feed their family, and that's where the government has you by the balls, because you sit there and, well, I'm not going to do this. Well, okay, you're going to get fired and you're going to lose pension, you're going to lose whatever. And then good luck getting any job in federal agency, any federal agency at all, including law enforcement. Like, good luck. You're not like, we'll make sure that you don't get this.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, well then you're looking at, you have kids and a wife and stuff like that and a family. In today's society, it's hard to survive. So what are you going to do? Well, a lot of people, I mean, if you look at anything when, crap hits the fan in any of the books or movies and stuff like that, a lot of people you see, they sit there and they rob other people, and one of the things they say is, well, I have a wife and kids. I'm doing this for my child. And so it's, and so that's where the hard thing is. But it would be really nice, just like I would love it, it's not ever going to happen, but I would just love it if just for one time, 1 year, whatever, nobody pays their taxes. Like, not one single person. You just, nope, not doing it.
Yeah, the problem is that involves the employers themselves not withholding it, and there's a 0% chance that's going to happen. Because while you may stand to lose a few $1,000s worth of federal taxes, they stand to lose millions upon
Hmm.
millions. And that's not going to happen. They're not going to do it.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, though, like, I don't disagree with you. I was talking to Gillian recently about, like, whistleblower protection laws, and I kind of giggled and mirthfully said, there are no whistleblower protection laws.
Hmm.
And she was like, no, 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 there are. And I'm like, oh, no, I understand that they're written down, but they don't amount to anything. Like, the truth of the matter is that if you blow the whistle on, we should be mature enough to recognize that if you blow the whistle in politics, your life is over. Like, the whistleblower hearings that have been going on in Congress right now, from IRS, from FBI, from people that tried to do the right thing and the agency went out of their way to try to ruin them forever. It's disgusting. But that's not surprising, not for anybody with any amount of experience in this realm or common sense. All I would say is that I agree with you that at a certain point, people need to take an honest look in the mirror and really ask themselves, like, can I live with myself if I don't stand up? And, like, I've been in that position. I stood up, I put my chin out, I got away with it. I was fully prepared for the consequences that were going to come if I didn't get away with it, though. But, like, people need to understand that if you continue to bend the knee, sooner or later you're going to wind up in a position where you can no longer stand up. And that is way beyond you dealing with your employer thing or you dealing with the state. That's just life. Like, sooner or later you have to decide, I don't care how bad the consequences are. I'm not willing to live like this. But as it relates to these magazine bans, I don't know. I'm getting tired of arguing with stupid people about stupid things. Fortunately, it doesn't impact me. I live in Louisiana, where this kinds of nonsense hasn't come yet. But we'll see. So, how do you feel about us veering towards World War III as we round this out?
I mean, it's going to happen sooner or later. So,
I mean, I'm outside of recruiting age, so all of you younger millennials and Gen Zs, y'all enjoy the guy y'all voted for, because he's about to get us into a shooting war if this crap keeps up.
yeah, quietly, that's what's interesting about this whole thing is it happened very, usually Biden, usually like, I mean, really anytime that they sign some big executive orders, at either side, they will have a press conference. They'll have cameras. They'll have 15 different pens they have to use, and they'll hand them out to all the people and all this crap. And yeah, Biden just very, very quietly, he signed an executive order, calling up 3,000 people, and sending them over to Europe. So go ahead.
Well, I do have a point of order on this because I did some quick research into it. This executive order, I don't believe, actually called 3,000 up. What it did was kind of lay the groundwork to be able to So I am too far removed from the military community at this point to like hear about the very beginning of troop movements. I mean, I've been out of uniform for almost 20 years now. Like, I don't find out most of this stuff much faster than most of y'all do in internet land. I haven't heard anything about troop movements or about people getting activated, but this does harken back to the very early days of GWAT when the IOR got put on alert and when stop loss started being implemented to stop people from exiting the military service, before a hop. So, like, to me, I don't know that I can draw the conclusion yet that like 3,000 people have been sent. But I will say that the fact that they've done this tells me that they're thinking they're going to need troops in Europe, and
Yeah, I
that's
mean, especially with Russia, and I've heard Ukraine is the propaganda machine that is saying Ukraine is doing great or doing whatever. I've heard that's completely false. Ukraine is getting their teeth kicked in. The problem is if you look at anything Russia, if you look at any conflict really that Russia has um, really done, or basically when they've lost, what have they done? Like they basically just completely scorched earth and destroyed everything.
they bulldoze everything on their way out.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen now? Do you think Putin and you think that Russia is going to be like, sorry, we're gonna go back to our borders here and stuff? No, Putin is there's something big coming, and I don't know if it's going to be nuclear or not. Hopefully not nuclear. That would be very crazy. But the fact that the U.S. is sending cluster bombs over uh, to Ukraine is interesting, and it's really crazy because and that's the thing is you have on one side you have a crazy lunatic who is just continuously pushing into Ukraine, pushing his troops, pushing people, doing what he can to try to take over. Um, and on the other hand, you have a crazy lunatic who can't complete a sentence and says, "Nah, we're not going to escalate things. We're not going to send troops. We're not going to send advanced armor. We're not going to send, what I go back to whenever they've said, nah, we're not going to send whatever." And then they turn around, they've sent bombs, they've sent Abrams tanks, now they're sending cluster bombs. Like, where's the like things keep escalating, and so it's interesting, and even Zelensky has come out and said the men and women or the sons and daughters of the United States are going to have to fight for Ukraine, which is complete BS. Ukraine needs to burn, and so does Russia. I have no side. I'm not siding with Russia. I'm not siding with Ukraine. But Ukraine, when all this stuff happened, before this even happened, Ukraine was like, it was labeled as one of the most corrupt countries in the world,
And I don't think it's gotten any better with
and it hasn't gotten any
a
better.
multi tens of billions dollar slush fund
Yeah,
given to
and
it.
it. So no, what Putin is doing is wrong. Um, yeah, it's 100% wrong. But I 100% I do not support Ukraine one bit. I will not. And if it wasn't for tax money, like if it wasn't for my tax money being forced, like me being basically forcing payment over there, I would not. I will not send supplies. I won't send money. I would not. I will not do a single thing to help Ukraine.
And see, I think my frustration in this arena always comes back to like we as Americans have a fundamental misunderstanding or disagreement about what the role of America is on the world stage. And there are those people that are very interventionist and they'll justify it by saying that we have to spread democracy, we have to hold back terror, we have to hold back fascism and authoritarianism and yada yada. But it's irrelevant to me because it's all justification. You're either interventionist or you're not,
Hmm.
and that is the dividing line. And non-interventionists typically tend to believe our military should be used for our own safety, debatable that how much security we grant our neighbors with our military, but that we should not be, to coin or to dredge up that old saying, we shouldn't be going out into the world looking for monsters to slay. It is not our job to overthrow every strongman a-hole on the planet who's being mean to his neighbors. But then you get the opposite point of view, which is if you had taken that, like if you took that standpoint, we would have never gotten into World War One. We may never have gotten into World War Two. I mean, truthfully, the Japanese kind of forced our hand when they bombed Pearl Harbor, but they did that as a preemptive strike because they believed we were going to get into the war, and they were trying to cripple our navy so that we couldn't fight them.
Well, that, and weren't we blockading Japan as well? I know I read that. I read that somewhere. I can't remember. It was a couple years ago. I read that we were blockading, basically, um, blocking Japan from like getting really any aid or like anything, helping out or whatever. So I don't know. But
That I'm not sure of, but I guess what I'm saying is to
right.
close that thought out. Like those are your two schools of thought. Now, if we're going to be interventionist, I am willing to accept the arguments that justify that, but I am not willing to accept the arguments that say we intervene in every other nation and their troubles on our dime.
Mm-mm.
So I'm saying at that point, I
And
expect
the blood of the people.
exactly. So like, not that I'm advocating of this, I'm just spitballing it, but like there is an argument to be made that if we privatize some portion of our military and we use that part of the military to go in to project military power on behalf of another nation, then we expect to be paid for that. Or we expect to be given oil or resources to offset the use of that arm of the military, but then the other arm of the military that is not privatized stays behind in the U.S. to provide for our own security. That's a solution that kind of ameliorates both of my concerns. But the current situation where we take our tax dollars to mobilize our sons and daughters to send them to foreign nations to bleed and die on behalf of other nations that owe us no allegiance and give us nothing in return, I'm sorry, but I have an objection to all of that. That's not to say that I'm pro-Russia. That's not to say that I'm anti-Ukraine. But that's purely to say I have a problem with the way that this is all being conducted. Because I see us suffering on behalf of another nation that tomorrow would spit into our eye and join forces with our enemy if they thought it would benefit them. I don't think they have any allegiance to us, and we have nothing to gain from this, except for tens of billions of dollars in debt we can't afford because we're already in debt. So like that whole situation is where I fall on Ukraine. Not a hard line for or against, not a hard line, send aid, don't send aid, but like I have a problem with every bit of how this is being conducted, and we can't even get to the point of discussing possible solutions because the propaganda machine won't allow it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to say that the only war that I can in my head that I can think is like complete justified that we got into was World War II. I believe that we would have gotten into World War II if it wasn't for Japan. Um, if it was straight up just Hitler doing what he was doing, I truly think that we would have eventually got into it because of just how the terrible things that he was doing. Um, and so yeah, so I believe that World War II, in my head, World War II was basically like justified, and we would have gotten into it either way. World War One, I don't think so. Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, the Iraq Afghanistan War, I think those were all nope. 100% like I don't think those were needed, justified. They were basically to push propaganda, to push the war machine, and to make some people some billions of dollars. And it was just disputes. Some of them, were just disputes that for some reason we got into, and we decided like, hey, Big Brother U.S. is going to come in, and that still didn't stop it. And I mean, if you look at Vietnam, they were like, I think that they were kind of like, hey, if we get involved, they're gonna shake in their in their in their flip flops or whatever you want to call them, sandals. But no, that didn't happen. We went in and I we did not it did not end good for us at all. I mean, you look at Civil War. I'm not going to touch much on that, but I don't think the Civil War was not needed. Um, to me, and people who argue that it was for slavery just go do some research because it wasn't they use it as an excuse. So it's so yeah. the U.S. has a very good a rap sheet for starting wars that are not needed. Um, it's very long, extremely long. We've started wars to destabilize countries, and that's a fact. And it's happening again. The scary thing is what's happening with Ukraine, because we're so focused on Russia. It's a proxy war, the U.S. versus Russia. What's scary is we've taken our sights off of China. Um,
And they're getting very aggressive towards Taiwan,
they
who
are
is
well,
one
they
of our
are.
allies.
Well, no, no, they're not. You know,
Mm.
they say that we say they are, but when you have a U.S. diplomat that goes over to China and says that we do not support the Biden administration does not support a independent Taiwan, like he says that when he's in China and he says that on television, like, nah, we're not. We're we're uh, we're we're allies with Taiwan when we
In
think it's
name only.
yeah, and when the United States wants something, and it's just like other than that, we basically with that statement we gave China the green light to steamroll Taiwan just like they did Hong Kong, and it's gonna happen. And if you guys check out Sean Ryan's show, he has I can't remember what episode it was, but he had a former CIA agent on there that
Yep.
very interesting insight into China. Basically, it came down to like the whole COVID thing, and the way he explained it was, uh, COVID was so bad that I mean it hurt China, but he says that's not China's footprint. It's not their MO. They don't just release something. That's not how they operate. They're more strategic. They think things through. They're well planning. Like they figure this stuff out. Taiwan, he said, like basically the way he explained it, it's like Taiwan is just going to be, um, we're going to wake up one day and be like, oh, China just steamrolled Taiwan. Like
Hmm.
yeah, it's going to go quick. Is his prediction. Will it? I don't know. But the fact
Yeah.
that the U.S. the fact that the U.S. gave the green light basically to say, nah, China, it's all yours. Like that tells you something. So and that's the thing is, and yeah, and the fact that while we're distracted with Russia, China has went into Afghanistan, made deals with the Taliban. They went into Iraq. They went into Iran. They've brokered peace deals with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Like they're in South America. They're in Africa. Like China has been making some strategic moves behind the curtains that nobody is seeing because our mainstream media is completely it's a propaganda machine that not the people don't need to know that, and the people are too blind to see this.
Pretty much.
So
All
enjoy
I
the
mean,
work.
yeah, well, I mean, my whole viewpoint on what's going on with China is like Andrew Bustamante was the gentleman's name that was on the Sean Ryan show you referred to, and like he came to a lot of the same conclusions that like I voiced, not privately, but I voiced myself about the fact that like where China as a nation, their cultural viewpoint is that old because they're such an old nation. Like America as an idea is less than 250 years old. And as a result, like it is very difficult for us to view things in terms of, well, this could take us hundreds of years to accomplish. But the Chinese that trace the idea of China back to the days of emperors and thousands of years of history, they as a nation, as a way of like viewing themselves will spend hundreds of years and multiple generations of family to accomplish something. The patience they have as a society is shocking to most Americans, to most people in the West, because we have a hard time fathoming what it feels like to say this is the goal and it's going to take like my grandchildren will accomplish this if I start the legwork now, and I will never see the pearly gates that I'm building today, but my grandkids will. And that's something that's very difficult for like us in the West to embrace and wrap our brains around. But that's just the way they think. So I agree with him. Do I think that COVID was intentionally released? Absolutely not. Makes no sense at all. Do I think that they were trying to make money off of our backs with an NIH funded study in a Wuhan virology lab, and the thing got out, and they lied to the whole world about it getting out because they didn't want the repercussions that would come from it? 120%, because that sounds like China.
Mhm. Yeah,
That sounds like the CCP, who gives zero F's about human life, including their own. They're going to do what's best for the party and best for the conglomerate, and that sounds like just Chinese culture not wanting to admit fault and being very proud and very prideful.
mhm.
Like, none of that surprises me. So I agree with him that COVID lab leak was probably an accident, but the end result was still what it was.
Yeah.
But as far as whether or not they roll Taiwan and whether or not we intervene, God only knows. I think right now the regime that's in charge wants to pay back favors done by the Ukrainians, so they're going to allow whatever happens in China to happen.
Yeah. And before we roll this out, I just want to throw it out there that the average, superpower, what do you want to call, whatever you want to call it, um, the the average time span, the lifespan of like a superpower, 250 years. We just hit this year, this July 4th, 247 years is the for the U.S.
Yeah.
Now, whether you want to believe that or not, but if you look at the way the cards are falling and the way how things are panning out with China in the background making its moves, our economy we've been at odds with China forever, for years. China's been trying to overtake as one of the leading people, or one of the leading governments, leading countries in the U.S. or in the world. The fact that you have BRICS going on right now, and the fact that countries have already paid for Russian oil in Chinese currency, not in the U.S. dollar, but they have went away from the U.S. dollar. Multiple countries have done that, and multiple more are following suit. So I don't know. I can definitely believe that the average lifespan holds true for it. Now, what that's going to happen, what is that going to do to the U.S. in the future? I have no idea. But this kind of goes back to the whole preparedness mindset. Um, get your supplies now so that you can protect you and yourself, or you and your loved ones and friends, family, whatever. Protect them in the future, because it. I think in our lifetime, I think we're going to definitely see a shift in the way things are going on in the world. Where the U.S. stands in the world, I think in our lifetime we're going to see a shift in that. If we have not already seen it, because I think we have already seen it as far as the standing of the U.S. in the world. But we're going to see a major shift that's going to have repercussions for many, many, many years beyond us. So, and our kids are going to have to deal with that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, just close this out. Like, I truly think at the end of the day, whenever we start talking about big geopolitical nonsense, somebody out there is going to say, well, what do I do? Like, how this is so big. How does it impact me, and how can I impact it? And all I would say is that, like, historically, collapses don't usually happen overnight. They usually happen in slow motion. Like, when you watch something like the Weimar Republic implode and Reichsmarks require a wheelbarrow full to buy a loaf of bread, like those kinds of situations, that didn't happen overnight. It happened quickly by our estimation, but it was still a process. So I would say that if you are concerned about what do I do to protect my family from this apocalyptic potential future version of what our economic prosperity as Americans looks like, I would say get your freaking debt under control or gone. Find ways you can cut your monthly recurring expenses, get as much expendable income as possible, shore up your position financially, and understand that when collapses happen, they happen in slow motion, and things slowly, progressively get worse every single day. And every single day, you will see the people who are living that close to the house of cards falling because their DTI is so out of control and they're just barely making the minimum payments and everything, they'll fold. And you won't, because you listened to the crazy, aggravating guy on the internet with the long beard who keeps telling y'all that getting your financial house in order is prepping. So, yes, have food. Yes, have ammo. Yes, have guns. Yes, do all those things. But just understand that when the collapse does happen, it's going to happen a lot slower than you think it is. And you are going to have months and months, if not years and years, of the noose slowly getting tighter around your neck before it finally pulls all at once. So, you can either fall a little at a time because you lived at the absolute edge of your expenses, or you can live super conservatively and hoard your money like a dwarf in a cave. And you'll last longer than everybody else will before things really, really get frisky. So, Matter of Fact's podcast is going to go out the door. Thank y'all for bearing with us, those of you who came back after the stream grenaded the first time. Stuart's going to grill me for at least a couple of hours about why I don't have a uninterrupted power supply on this desktop, and Andrew will probably join in.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.